Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Originally released on the Super Nintendo in 1992. It has received a number of re-releases and ports over the years to various Nintendo platforms. It is currently available on the Nintendo Switch as part of the $20 tier of the Nintendo Switch Online service. This was the third Zelda game released, and this is very much a sequel to the original Zelda, more so than to the second Zelda, as it ignores virtually all of the gameplay changes made in the second game. So in many ways, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is a bigger, fancier version of Legend of Zelda. The game begins with Link waking up in the middle of the night and breaking into Hyrule Castle. You find the princess in the dungeon and help her get out of there and the castle as a whole. You then leave her in a church and start your adventure. This time around, you're not actually after the Triforce. During this first part of the game, you need to go to 3 dungeons to get some pendants so you can get the Master Sword out of the forest. And when I played this game as a child, back when it first released, I actually thought these 3 dungeons were going to be it. And honestly, that seemed a little short to me as I'd played the first 2 games, and they both had considerably more than 3 dungeons, but I also thought there might be a second quest like in the first game, where things were shuffled around a bit, possibly made more elaborate on this 16-bit version. However, once you get the Master Sword and fight this evil wizard here, it turns out the game is just getting started, as now you have your 8 dungeons. And not only that, you have this whole dark world to explore. And as you can go back and forth between the dark and light world, there are times when things you do in one world affect the other world. And it's also worth noting that the dungeons are numbered on the world map. And you pretty much do have to do number 1 first, as you get a hammer there that lets you access more of the world. But after that, you have a great deal of freedom to sequence break if you're so inclined. And personally, I think you should absolutely go to the 4th dungeon next, because once you get the treasure from inside the 4th dungeon, you can upgrade the Master Sword. How exactly a mythical sword of power can be upgraded by a common blacksmith, I'm not really sure. But apparently, that can happen. But doing this makes the Dark World, by and large, easier to deal with. However, not everything you need, or can find, is actually in dungeons. There are items to be found in the overworld, some of which are optional, some of which are necessary. And how necessary some of the overworld items are is definitely on a sliding scale. There are, for example, 4 bottles for you to keep either fairies or potions in. They are incredibly useful to have, but technically speaking, you don't need them to complete the game. The ice rod might just seem like a silly novelty, but it's actually needed to fight at least 1 boss in the game. What about the medallions that let you cast spells, kind of? Well, of the 3, 2 of them are actually needed to access dungeons. But then there's a cape you can find that'll make you invisible. That seems very useful, but is not necessary to complete the game. And there's also optional things you can miss that make the game much easier if you actually go looking. There are several great fairies in the game you can find. Some of them will upgrade specific items for you. This is actually how you get the final version of the Master Sword. Another will upgrade the amount of bombs and arrows you can carry. All you need to do is pay her enough. And truthfully speaking, there's not a whole lot else to do with the currency in this game. But that's sort of the thing about this game. There are the 11 dungeons you need to get through. But there's so many other things you can do outside of the dungeons, most of which is entirely unnecessary, but will give you an advantage if you just seek it out. So is Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past worth your time and money? Well, if you're inclined to pay for the $20 Switch Online service, this is certainly one of the better games to play that's available on there. It would be nice if there still was a virtual console where you could pay, say, $10 to just own this game. But sadly, the idea of a virtual console seems to have died with the Wii U and the 3DS. But this particular Zelda is very worth playing, because this is where the series really crystallized on what it would be going forward. Because every Zelda that would come after this, well, up until Breath of the Wild, would use this game as something of a blueprint. You have your dungeons to get through, but you also have a bunch of other stuff you can do outside the dungeons. Ocarina of Time might have lost the overhead view, but it was still doing essentially what this game did, just in 3D. And beyond that, we'd actually revisit the world of A Link to the Past in A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS many years later. If you're interested in playing this game and don't have a Switch or don't wish to pay for the online, you could of course track down a cartridge, possibly a reproduction of the original Super Nintendo version, or you could find a copy of the Game Boy Advanced version of A Link to the Past. The controls are slightly different due to the limitations of the GBA, but it's every bit as good as the original Super Nintendo version. It also comes with Four Swords Adventure, but before you get excited, that will require you to have 4 other people with Game Boy Advances and a copy of the game. And also the 4-way link cable. Besides that, if you happen to find an old Wii, Wii U, or 3DS where someone had it on Virtual Console, you can certainly play it that way as well. It's also not impossible that this particular game will get a remake, as Link's Awakening, a game heavily inspired by Link to the Past, got a remake not too long ago. So it's very conceivable we might get a remake of Link to the Past in the same style. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.